All right, Merry Christmas again. It's technically not Christmas Day anymore, but in Europe they actually celebrate Christmas December 24th to December 26th. It's a full 3 days. So we could still say Merry Christmas at 6:30 here on the West Coast. It is 24 hours since the 49ers were getting beaten by the Ravens, and now the 49ers are enjoying the end of their off day. They're going to be back to work tomorrow for the first day of practice against the Washington Commanders. So we're going to take a look at what the 49ers must tweak moving forward if they still want to achieve the goal that they set out to achieve at the start of this season, which is bringing home the sixth Super Bowl title for the franchise. And guess what? The 49ers are still betting favorites to do so. The Ravens, they're the second team in the odds list to win the Super Bowl this year. The 49ers are number one. So what must San Francisco do? Well, the importance of playing a clean game was illustrated yesterday. And I think that, you know, the Ravens obviously did, with the exception of the safety that Lamar Jackson took, which I thought was a really, really bad play, and it put Baltimore on a bad track, but the 49ers weren't able to capitalize on it. Obviously, the official there got in the way. I think that Chase Young might have chased down Lamar Jackson anyway. It was one of those that was like, what is he doing? They snapped that ball at the 20-yard line, and he still found his way into his own end zone. That's a lot of running backwards for Lamar Jackson in that case. But outside of that, the Ravens played a clean game. They did drop a few passes, but they didn't come close to ever turning it over beyond that. And the 49ers didn't. So that is something that you've probably heard mentioned a lot over the course of the past 24 hours, the 49ers turnovers and the fact that the Ravens didn't turn it over. And the reason that's mentioned a lot is because it's absolutely the truth. The 49ers were more efficient on a yards per play basis. They were more productive on a raw yardage basis. They were more explosive in this game than the Ravens. When you look at the percentage of plays, they gained at least 20 yards, but they obviously weren't as good on the scoreboard, which is where it matters. And the clean game aspect is what was missing for the San Francisco 49ers. So they've got to play a clean game moving forward. I'm not going to sit here belaboring that for too long because I've already talked about it in an entire article up on The Athletic. I've talked about it over the course of 2 or 3 videos at this point. Just something that needs to happen. And to be honest, it is something that has happened for the 49ers in their other games this season. The team is now 11-4, so they played 15 times so far here in 2003. And I would say that 11 out of those 15 times, maybe even 12 out of those 15 times, they've been just fine in the turnover column. So the vast majority of the time, they've actually been performing at the top of the league as far as giveaways, keeping them at the league low, and takeaways, keeping that at the league high. Yesterday was an outlier, but yesterday did illustrate the importance of playing a clean game. From Brock Purdy's standpoint, the counter adjustment that he's going to have to make, especially if they play the Ravens again, but I think teams like the Rams, maybe even Washington to some extent, because Washington has had a longer time to prepare. The 49ers are going to be a little bit tired in this game coming up because I think they've already looked tired over the past few weeks. I think this team could really use the first round bye, but they've got to grit their teeth and get through these final 2 games. When you look at the 49ers adjustment assignment in front of them moving forward to be able to play a clean game, they're going to be relying a lot on Brock Purdy's processing power. And I think that we've already seen that he's got a whole lot of processing power. I think that he obviously is exactly what Kyle Shanahan wants as a decision maker at the line of scrimmage. I think that I mentioned this a little bit earlier today. He was going to his earlier reads, especially on the turnover plays, with the exception of the third interception that was batted into the air on the 50-50 ball with George Kittle. But the Ravens were the type of team that was taking away spot throws from Brock Purdy. It was a physical, balanced defense that I had talked about a lot, from Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen, the linebackers in the middle, to a good secondary with Kyle Hamilton. Obviously, Marlon Humphrey was one of the corners who made some big plays yesterday. And then a defensive line that comes in enough waves to generate 50-plus sacks on a season that's not even finished yet. The Ravens were a team that was disciplined enough and that was in position to make Brock Purdy process through more reads than normal. And that doesn't mean that Brock Purdy's incapable of processing down to his second and his third reads. It just means that he hadn't necessarily had to do that, especially all the way to the third read, for several straight weeks, because the 49ers weren't playing opponents that were nearly as good as the Baltimore Ravens. So the fact that Brock Purdy is a really good processor is going to come in handy for the 49ers, because he's going to have to make a counter adjustment that has to do with his processing, because they may play the Ravens again, and the teams they play moving forward as these games turn into higher and higher stakes contests, these teams are going to be trying to take away the spots that the 49ers are throwing to. Brock Purdy is one of the best anticipatory throwers in the NFL. He's delivering the ball to spots before his receivers come out of breaks. That is great if the defenders are shadowing the receiver and just going along with what the receiver is doing. But if the defenders are literally playing spots, if they're breaking toward where they think the ball is going to be, instead of breaking and reacting to how the receiver is cutting, well, they can have a step up on you. And the key in that regard, and you saw Kyle Hamilton sabotage a Brock Purdy pass on the biggest interception of the game, which was the first 49ers drive. The key in that regard is to be able to pass up throwing reads and progress on to the next one, which is probably going to be more open. Because as I said before this game against the Ravens, the 49ers have the geometry advantage. The 49ers have the eligibles necessary to get open and be open if Brock Purdy makes the correct decision, and I stand by that. I said it before they played the Ravens. He obviously didn't make the correct decision on drive one, and that changed the entire complexion of the game, right? If the 49ers score on that first drive, I think they play downhill, and the whole thing looks different. So it's going to be fascinating to see Brock Purdy adapt moving forward against defenses that obviously will take some of what the Ravens were doing as far as that spot defense goes, and will try to take away what the 49ers offense has been succeeding with. The problem for opponents is that this 49ers offense is so loaded, and the geometry works out as long as Brock Purdy is making the right decisions. And we know he has the appropriate arm talent to deliver the correct throws paired with the right decisions. The question now just is, does he process forward into the correct decisions that will allow the 49ers to see success? Run defense is something the 49ers absolutely need to fix. This is a tweak that is necessary, and I would even say tweak bordering on major repair. 49ers run defense still number 25 in EPA per play allowed in the NFL. They've been number 25 even without Eric Armstead. So with and without Eric Armstead, same split, which shows you a systemic problem with the 49ers interior run defense. Leads me to believe they need more bodies there. Well, they picked up Sebastian Joseph Day today, who's a very plus run defender. It's the best run defender you're going to find at this point of the free agent process. People were talking about Ndamukong Suh. Well, he's 36. Sebastian Joseph Day is 28 years old. That's a whole lot better age, much fresher legs, fresher upper body for the 49ers. My question is this guy, Sebastian Joseph Day, immediately the 49ers' best interior run defender? Because he's better than Javon Hargrave, who's not a very good run defender. Javon Kinlaw has turned into a better pass rusher than run defender, which has been one of the crazier twists. Kevin Givens, I mean, he's a rotational guy. I don't know if he stands out one way or the other. He's very quick. So I think he's good against athletic type linemen because he can outfox them with that ability to move, especially laterally, explosively off the ball. But he's not a superstar. Obviously, Clea Davis is unavailable. Eric Armstead, when he's healthy, is unquestionably the 49ers' best interior run defender, but he's not healthy right now. So is Sebastian Joseph Day going to be that immediate upgrade for the 49ers? I think yes. Super Bowl pedigree, played a big role on those 2021 Rams, has been with the Chargers Obviously, the Chargers don't have the same coaching staff that they started the season with Brandon Staley now gone. So there was a release in San Diego / Los Angeles, not really San Diego, but I like calling them the San Diego Chargers. And the 49ers stand to benefit. The run defense I've been saying it all year. The run defense has been the 49ers' biggest Achilles heel defensively. On offense, the biggest Achilles heel is definitely pass protection. It's not Brock Purdy. It's not, something at the skill positions, because they obviously have a ton of those guys. It's not George Kittle, occasionally not reaching to catch a football and letting that 50-50 ball bounce in there. It is the O-line. So you have interior D-line and 49ers offensive line, which yesterday ended the game in really bad shape, right? We talked about this. Colton McKivitz at left tackle, Ben Barch at left guard, and then Spencer Burford, who hadn't repped a tackle snap since college at San Antonio. He was at right tackle, and he gave up a lot to Jadeveon Clowney late in the game. By that point, the 49ers were in desperation mode. Well, they need to do their best to get out of desperation mode. The problem is that the supply and demand scales for offensive and defensive line are really different. Whereas D-line, their bodies out there, because the D-line development around the league is outpacing the O-line development. Guys like Sebastian Joseph Day are way more likely to be available to pick up than anybody along the O-line. My friend texted me and he said, it's too bad after the 49ers picked up Joseph Day. He said, it's too bad there's not an interior lineman or a right tackle of Joseph Day's caliber for the 49ers to sign at this point of the season. But since we've seen a proliferation of defensive linemen and a relative shortage of offensive linemen, it just isn't the case. You don't have those bodies to be able to add. So the 49ers have to make do with what they have on this football team. And we're waiting to see Aaron Banks' injury appraisal. We're waiting to know if Trent Williams is going to be ready to go for the 49ers coming up on Sunday. He should be. It looked like he was available to go back in the game based on how he was pacing the sideline with a groin injury, but the 49ers played it safe. How about the strip that he made, even though the interceptor was down at the time? That was still a hell of a play from Trent Williams. It was illustrating his MVP case. So we'll be watching that. Obviously, it's Brendel, Burford, and McKivitz. The rest of the starting linemen, they're healthy right now. John Feliciano can play instead of Spencer Burford in case Burford has to be the emergency tackle. Although today the 49ers re-signed Matt Pryor. And one of the mistakes that the 49ers made before playing the Ravens is that they waived Matt Pryor. It was one of their emergency tackles. And Pryor would have seen action in this game instead of Spencer Burford at tackle. But without Pryor, they were short on the emergency tackles. And then that comeback attempt, which was a drop back passing exhibition, right? You couldn't really run when you're down 3 scores at the end of the game. You have to drop back and pass. That put the 49ers into a tough spot along the offensive line. Special teams, something else that the 49ers absolutely have to fix. Special teams, from the very start, they only missed 6 tackles defensively, which might seem low, but I think there's a bias toward thinking that they had more defensive tackles because they missed so many damn tackles on special teams. You can argue that the very first play of the game, the kick return for the Baltimore Ravens, the 49ers missed 4 tackles on it. 4 tackles in 1 return. I think technically it's going to be logged as 3, but you can make the argument that there was a 4th missed tackle in there. D. Winters had one of the missed tackles. Darrell Luter Jr., so 2 rookies were in on missed tackles. Hey, you can't count on and just say that tackles should be taken for granted, because opponents are trying to break the tackles and they're paid too. But the 49ers have been missing tackles, and they've been doing so on special teams as well for a little too long now. And that third phase of the game did not help them out yesterday. And the 49ers special teams is rated in the 20s in the NFL. We know that the Ravens were in the top 10. The 49ers lost way too much field position on special teams. They played the kicking game to a draw, which is the good news, with Jake Moody making a field goal and obviously Justin Tucker making his field goals in this game. But you either need Moody to boot these kicks out of the end zone, or you need the 49ers coverage unit to do a better job tackling. One of my questions about yesterday's game is, did Shanahan coach for an 8-quarter game against the Ravens? This is an intriguing thought to me. I don't think Shanahan will ever admit something like this, but there is a strong chance that the 49ers and the Ravens play again in the Super Bowl. And some of the tactical decisions that the 49ers made in this game were mighty interesting. And to me, smelt of a long run strategy, not just a 4-quarter strategy against Baltimore. For example, veteran cornerback Jason Verrett, who hasn't been on a game day field in a couple years now, entered the game in the third quarter at a critical juncture and actually gave up a touchdown pass to Nelson Aguilar, one of the Ravens receivers. Verrett played only 5 snaps, and he exited the game after that touchdown. Shanahan today said that the plan was for Verrett to actually play 4 to 8 snaps no matter what. They wanted to work him back into the lineup. Obviously, a player's not going to be playing his best football in his first action, cold turkey, coming off an Achilles tear, but that's exactly the situation into which Jason Verrett was thrusted into. And he was thrusted into it in the third quarter at a critical juncture of this football game. It seemed, and that to me, it didn't seem like the smartest move. It was a curious move from the 49ers, right? To me, though, I look at that and I say, wait, are they thinking long-term here? Do they want to give Jason Verrett some really meaningful snaps so they could, A, evaluate where he's at, and B, give him the confidence to take a larger role on in the final 2 weeks of the regular season and the playoffs? Because we know it's been iffy throughout. Even after the benching of Isaiah Oliver, the 49ers slot corner, outside corner position, it hasn't been the smoothest kind of situation this year. So it makes sense that they would want Verrett to be part of the fold. So my question is that, something that they're looking at for the future? And was it worth the 5 snaps they gave Jason Verrett yesterday? Obviously, you look at the loss, you look at the fact that they cut Matt Pryor before the game and they didn't have a tackle to use when they ran out of tackles later in the game, so they had moved Burford over. Obviously, it seems that some of the 49ers strategic decisions hurt them against the Ravens. So, every game right now is so important. I don't think that some of these transactions would have been worth it, but it is worth noting that they do suggest that Shanahan was playing the 8-quarter game against the Ravens, anticipating that he might face Baltimore one more time. So setting stuff up on film for that rematch, which would obviously come in the Super Bowl. That's going to be reliant on Brock Purdy being a good processor. He's obviously, if these two teams face again, he's going to want Brock Purdy to be processing later into the progression to avoid the Raiders sitting on coverage. And all of that is also going to tie into Lamar Jackson's changeup. If the 49ers are playing an 8-quarter game against the Ravens right now, the fact that Lamar Jackson had been a pocket guy primarily over the start of the season, but then reverted back to the outside the pocket scrambling guy in the game yesterday. Well, what's going to happen if the 49ers play the Ravens again? Yesterday, San Francisco tried to honor Jackson as a pocket guy, and that, I think, backfired. Maybe you just need to treat Lamar Jackson as the quarterback that he's been throughout his entire NFL career, or at least most of it. Maybe you have to be ready for him to be bolting out of the pocket and running. And that changeup through the 49ers for a loop, I do wonder if it can throw them for a loop again, or if a related changeup can throw them for a loop again if these two teams play again a little bit later in the season. But that's my overarching question. Did Shanahan coach an 8-quarter game against the Ravens? And hey, even if he is coaching an 8-quarter game against the Ravens, the offensive line remains a concern for the 49ers. They've got to continue scheming around that. They've got to continue to see progress. The way that you see progress is if you stay healthy. Banks has shown progress over the past couple of years at left guard, but the turf toe re-aggravation throws a wrench in that. And then you take Trent Williams off that line, and it makes everything a whole lot harder. It's going to be fun. I'm ready for these adjustments. I'm ready for the 49ers to take the next step as far as the story of this season. Hit a little bit of adversity, a bump in the road, and, at the end of the day, it might just make all of this more fun as this team marches forward toward the playoffs, and their goal will be the Super Bowl. And to maximize those Super Bowl chances, you want to get the bye week. And there's only one bye week given out now in both the NFC and the AFC. So that number 1 seed is the team that gets it. We shall see if the 49ers end up in that category. All right, Sebastian Joseph Day is aboard. 49ers talk is concluded. It's been 19 to 20 minutes with all you. Time to go get some dinner. Talk to you soon.